Hey, myth fans, welcome to Mythology and Lore. Today we're tackling Ragnarök, aka the Viking end of the world party. Like, subscribe and drop a comment if you'd rather battle a wolf the size of a mountain or just hit snooze one more time. All right, let's dive in before the world ends. The world had reached its breaking point. The signs that whispered the fate of all things for centuries were becoming screams, echoing through every realm. For 3 long years, summer had failed to arrive in Midgard. The great Fimbul winter, the endless winter, sank its claws deep into the earth, spreading ice over fields and forests. Trees stood dead, rivers solidified into ice, and the sun grew dim and cold. Wolves stalked villages where food had run scarce, while the sky above seemed to weigh heavy, as if mourning the death of time itself. It was a world on the edge of collapse, and those who still lived feared the prophecy spoken of old. Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. The final sign came on a night darker than any before, when even the stars seemed to vanish. The sound of a great chain snapping echoed from the bowels of the earth. The giant wolf Fenrir, imprisoned for ages, had broken free from his bonds. His terrible howls tore through the 9 realms, sending tremors through the branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree. Skull and Hati, Fenrir's monstrous offspring, were unleashed as well. These ravenous wolves, forever hungry, set upon the sun and moon. Hati chased Mani, the moon, while Skjold snapped at Sol, the sun. As they drew closer, the light of the world flickered, casting the realms into an eerie twilight. In Jotunheim, the realm of the giants, Surtur stirred. The fire giant, ancient and terrible, stood as tall as mountains, and his sword blazed with the primordial fire of Muspelheim. Surtur had long awaited this moment. It was he who would set the world ablaze. He strode forth from his realm, each step leaving behind molten craters and filling the air with the stench of burning earth. He began his march towards Asgard, determined to fulfill his role in the great prophecy, to bring about the doom of the gods. In the oceans of Midgard, Jormungandr, the world serpent, awoke. The waters trembled and rose as he uncoiled his massive body. His scales scraped against the sea floor, and as he lifted his enormous head, his venomous breath spread across the winds, darkening the sky with a toxic miasma. The serpent circled the world, causing the seas to swell and rage. The shorelines of Midgard were swallowed, and the mountains trembled as the great serpent's coils wrapped around them, squeezing the life from the land. In Asgard, Heimdall, the vigilant watchman, stood at the edge of Bifrost, the rainbow bridge. His ears, so keen they could hear the grass grow, caught the ominous reverberations of the 9 realms suffering. He seized the Gjallarhorn and brought it to his lips. With a breath, he blew a blast so thunderous that it echoed through all the worlds. It was the signal. The final battle had come. Ragnarök was upon them. Odin, Allfather and King of the Gods, readied himself for the inevitable. He stood atop Hlidskjalf, his high seat, and saw all that unfolded. His ravens, Hugin and Munin, flew swiftly across the darkened skies, bringing him tidings from every corner of existence. He had sacrificed much to gain the knowledge of this day, his eye, his time upon Yggdrasil, and countless other sacrifices. But even he could not change the fate that was sealed in the threads of Urd's loom. His heart, hardened by countless wars and betrayals, ached nonetheless. Yet there was no time for mourning. "To arms!" Odin cried, and the warriors of Valhalla surged forth at his command. Great horns sounded throughout Asgard, and the Einherjar, the fallen warriors who had been training for this day, gathered in legions. The Valkyries, their winged steeds cutting through the air, descended to escort the dead souls who would fight once more. As Thor the Thunderer strode forward, his mighty hammer Mjolnir crackled with fierce blue lightning. His beard, wild and red, streamed in the icy wind. He met his father's gaze, and for a moment they stood as father and son rather than warlord and warrior. "I will not fail you," Thor declared. "I know, my son," Odin replied, "but be wary. Your fate is sealed. Do not let glory blind you." The armies of Asgard assembled upon the plain of Vigrid, a field vast enough to host the final battle of the gods. Across the plain, the forces of chaos amassed. giants and monsters of all shapes, led by the great wolf Fenrir and Surtur, whose swords still burned with the fury of Muspelheim. Loki, the trickster and Odin's blood brother, stood amongst the enemy ranks, his lips curled into a wicked grin as he beheld the gods whom he had once called kin. His betrayal had sealed their doom. With a shattering roar, the battle began. Odin charged on his eight-legged steed, Sleipnir, toward Fenrir, Gungnir, his spear glinting in the half-light. The wolf leapt, its maw opened wide, and the two met in a collision that sent shock waves across the battlefield. Odin struck true, driving his spear deep into the beast's hide, but Fenrir's jaws closed upon him with the force of fate itself. The All-Father vanished into darkness, devoured in a single terrible gulp. Thor's wrath exploded at the sight of his father's end. He stormed towards Jormungandr, who loomed over the battlefield, his massive body undulating like a wave. Mjolnir struck again and again, breaking scales and sending sparks of lightning crackling through the air. The world serpent responded with a torrent of venom, a black rain that seared the flesh of gods and men alike. The two clashed with such ferocity that the skies split, thunder bellowed, and the earth shuddered beneath them. At last, with one final, earth-rending blow, Thor crushed Jormungandr's skull. But as the serpent's life left its massive body, its last breath washed over Thor, filling his lungs with poison. The thunder god staggered, his strength failing him, and with 9 labored steps, he fell to the ground, his final breath leaving his lips. Elsewhere, Freyr, the god of fertility and peace, faced Surtur. Freyr, having traded his sword for love long ago, fought with an antler in place of a blade. He met the fire giant with a fierce determination, striking blow after blow. Yet Surtur's fiery aura scorched all that came near. With a swing of his blazing sword, Surtur cleaved Freyr in two, and with a triumphant bellow, he raised his sword high, its flames now bright enough to rival the long-vanished sun. With a single cataclysmic strike, Surtur plunged the sword deep into the earth. The fires of Muspelheim surged forth, consuming the roots of Yggdrasil and setting the world tree ablaze. The battlefield was chaos incarnate. The earth cracked and split, swallowing armies whole. The seas rose higher and higher, as if yearning to devour the sky itself. Loki and Heimdall faced each other amidst the carnage, each knowing this would be their end. The trickster and the guardian fought with all the hatred and familiarity of ancient rivals. Heimdall's sword slashed through Loki's armor, and Loki's knife plunged into Heimdall's side. They fell together, their bodies entwined in death. As the final battles raged, Skuld and Hati closed in on their prey. With a bone-chilling snap, Skuld devoured the sun, and the world plunged into pitch-black darkness. Not long after, Hati seized the moon in his jaws, and even the faint silver glow that had graced the night was no more. The sky, once vibrant with stars and the colors of the realms, was now an endless void. The fire spread from Muspelheim, reaching every corner of the 9 realms. The seas boiled, the mountains crumbled, and Yggdrasil, the great ash tree that held the cosmos together, groaned as its branches burned and snapped. Then there was a silence that seemed to stretch for eternity. The fires that had consumed the world began to die down, their embers cooling to ash. Smoke choked the air, and the land lay black and broken. The old world was gone, lost to flame and chaos. And yet, within the ashes, something stirred. A faint light emerged, flickering at first, then growing brighter. From the realm of Hel, Baldur, the beloved god of light, returned to the world of the living. His presence brought warmth where there had been only cold, and a glimmer of hope where all seemed lost. He was not alone. His blind brother Hödur, who had once been the instrument of his death, emerged beside him, and together they walked upon the desolate earth, their steps leaving new life in their wake. Leif and Lifthrasir, the last mortals, awoke from where they had sheltered in the trunk of Yggdrasil's roots. They had been hidden there, deep in the tree's embrace, protected from the fires and floods. They emerged into the new dawn, their breath visible in the crisp air as they took their first steps into a world reborn. All around them, new shoots of green pierced the blackened soil, and the first rays of a new sun crept over the horizon. The surviving gods, Vidar, who had avenged Odin by slaying Fenrir, Vali, son of Odin, who had escaped the worst of the chaos, and Magni and Modi, the sons of Thor, gathered on the plains of Vigrid. Together they surveyed the devastation and the faint stirrings of new life. Vidar still wore the blood of Fenrir on his boots, his hands calloused and bruised from the struggle. Mani and Modi bore Mjolnir, the hammer that had once belonged to their father, its weight now a symbol of their inheritance and the memory of the Thunderer. The flames had passed and the darkness had fled, but it was not without cost. The gods had changed and the world with them. The halls of Asgard were no more. The rainbow bridge had crumbled and the roots of Yggdrasil lay charred. The 9 realms were no longer separate but intertwined in their ashes. There was no going back to what had been. The cycle had run its course, and now it would begin anew. From the ashes of Ragnarök, the world would be reborn, but its scars would remain. The stories of old would pass into legend, and new tales would take their place. The gods who had survived would guide humanity as it took its first steps into this new age. Baldur's light would shine down upon Midgard, bringing warmth to the world that had nearly frozen to death. The cycle would continue, as it always had, as it always would. And in some distant time, when the world had forgotten, when the fields were green once more, and the skies bright, the stories would speak again of the end that had come before, and would one day come again, of Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods.